We're building the perfect mock drafts here in the Sportsocracy, and it's time for the New York Giants. The perfect mock drafts, aptly named after the perfect comedian.
Now you kids are probably asking yourselves, hey, Matt, how can we get back on the right track?
Well, to get back on the right track, New York Giants, you got to build an offensive line at some point, right?
Well, originally I had been told they planned on going 2 offensive linemen at 5 and 7. The additions in free agency with John Feliciano, I believe that has changed that. So I still think you have to come away with 1, and you have to know Carolina's picking right behind you. So you get the offensive lineman you want at 5. There's obviously going to be another player. There are, I think, 8 high-end players in this draft between upside, floor, all the good buzzwords that you use with draft prospects. So at 5, you have to take the one that you don't think would be there at 7.
And at number 5 overall in the Flostradamus, Chris Farley, perfect mock draft for the New York Giants, it's Evan Neal, the offensive tackle from Alabama.
There's one thing I love pairing with quarterbacks that are either suspect, bad, or I don't know.
Because I'm going to bunk with you, buddy. We're going to be buddies. We're going to be pals. We're going to wrestle around.
And that's exactly what Evan Neal is. To me, he comes in immediately, starts on the right side, pushes Matt Pert into the inside, and now you got Bookins and Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal. I like him better on the right side. It is a little high for a right tackle, but this is just a different draft. I do think he could play on the left side, but his best fit's on the right side. He's so big that he's always going to struggle with leverage, speed rushers, and on the left side. I saw enough from Andrew Thomas last year. I didn't think he could play on the left. He showed pretty admirably with a pretty bad offensive line. But you add in Feliciano, you add in Glowinski, you got Evan Neal on the right side. Now you've got a line that should be able to block for Saquon Barkley, so you'll see what you have there, and should be able to keep Daniel Jones upright, and you'll be able to see what you have there.
Carolina Panthers pick at 6, and then the Giants come back up again at number 7. This the number 1 pick from the Justin Fields trade last year with the Chicago Bears. And at number 7, you got them taking Kayvon Thibodeau, the edge rusher out of Oregon.
Yeah, and by this time, Kayvon Thibodeau is going to be sitting in the draft room saying,
Sweet mother of God, what is the holdup?
When I did my first big board, he was 2. He was only behind Kyle Hamilton. Now he's been passed. Attitude issues at the combine. He obviously did not interview well. Nobody seems to be in love with him, but with every prospect, there comes a time where the fall has gone too far. And Kayvon Thibodeau's high side is better than any edge rusher in this class. Aiden Hutchinson, Trayvon Walker, any of them. I feel like some teams have passed Thibodeau with Jermaine Johnson, but he's specifically 4-3 for me. I don't want him standing up. And I look at Thibodeau, and I actually do want him to stand up. I think you put him on the opposite side of Azeez Ojulari, and now you've got the pass rush. I'm sure somebody will say Sauce Gardner. Sauce Gardner ain't going to be there for you at 5. He's just not. And as long as you've got James Bradbury on the roster, it's hard for me to look at that as a need when you've got 2 starting-level corners, and we will address that position further later in this here video.
In the second round, the Giants come up at number 36 overall, their own pick. Christian Harris, linebacker out of Alabama.
I feel like they've needed a linebacker since I've been alive. And
since LT.
I mean, somebody that can call the defense, somebody in the middle, the rangy linebacker. They just haven't had that. You know, Blake Martinez could do certain things. I get to a point where, all right, you are grossly limited. So you need somebody that's rangy that you can pair with him, and that becomes your linebacking core. With what you've got with Thibodeau in this scenario, and Ojulari and Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence, I feel like you've got enough to – you need a trash man, and that's what Christian Harris would be. He showed well at the combine. He was faster than I thought. The biggest drawbacks on him are in coverage. So, and I just look at a guy like Wink Martindale and go, you know what, you're going to figure it out. You know, I know he didn't do the greatest job with Patrick Queen, but this is just a different linebacker. There's a lot of downhill run-stopping ability in him, and I think he can be better in coverage. I just feel like Saban asked him to do things that he wasn't necessarily built to do. And so you pair him with Wink Martindale, and now I'm looking at that defense going, you know, that ain't half bad.
2 third-round picks for the Giants at 67 overall. Nick Bonito, edge rusher / linebacker out of Oklahoma.
And I'm sure somebody's going, wait, I thought he was an edge rusher. Well, he can be. He can also be a piece. The thing about Nick Bonito is that you look at the size, and I'm not sure exactly where he fits in the NFL because he's 6'3", but he's thin. There are some teams that are grading him as an off-ball linebacker. I look at him as a versatile piece. I think he's going to be in that Isaiah Simmons role, but he's going to be more edge linebacker, whereas Simmons is more safety linebacker. And that just allows you to move him around. He can be a situational pass rusher. That is what he currently does well. He's just going to have an issue with size. And so you look at that, and here, this is a great value. Now I'm looking at my pass rush going, I have 3 pieces that I can interchange. Thibodeau is the 3-down guy. I think Ojulari can be the better against the run and still provide something as a pass rusher, and then you've got Bonito that you can just move around and send him as a hellhound after quarterbacks. He's a very good player. He's a tweener in a way that you don't usually see tweeners because I'm not 100% sure where he fits. It's kind of like what Nancy Reagan used to say about porn. I know you're a football player. I just can't quite figure out where it is that you're going to play, and I feel like somebody like Don Martindale could figure that out.
Later in the third at pick 81, the Giants have the Dolphins pick here, and they could take Greg Dulcich, the tight end out of UCLA.
This would be the best tight end you've had since Jeremy Shockey. He doesn't provide much as a blocker, and pairing him with Ricky Seals-Jones, I do feel like you can do some spread it out things. To me, I just look at what Brian Daboll did with Dawson Knox, who couldn't play dead in the Western as a blocker, but he had really soft hands. He's not overly athletic, but he just found a way to get open. And it seemed like he was always open, and I think that's a paramount part of this offense, and that's something that Greg Dulcich would bring in immediately. I've compared him to Mark Andrews favorably throughout the entire process. I thought he was going to stay a player that I was just in love with and nobody else was going to catch up to it. Now, with the Jalen Weidermeyer slide, Isaiah Likely's kind of a scheme fit kind of guy. I'm looking at Trey McBride as the number 1 tight end in this class. Greg Dulcich is 2. And this is, if you do all of these things, now you've got the receiving core if they're healthy, Saquon with a line that can block for him, and I've got Dulcich that can be the security blanket. And now, if you're Daniel Jones, there's really no excuse because Dulcich is a guy that can contribute right away. Evan Neal is a guy that is going to be what he's going to be within 6 games in the NFL. He's a very ready-made product. So no matter what happens, if Daniel Jones is the player you want him to be, now you've got the quarterback, now you got the things around him, and you can make that decision. If he's not, next year you go into a draft that's much better at quarterback with Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Alex Van Dyke from Miami, Tyler Shuck from Texas Tech. There's just a lot of guys that not all of them are going to bust out. So that will be, no matter what happens, that will be a better quarterback class than you have this year. And so that gives the Giants an out with Jones and will set that next rookie up in a better position than Daniel Jones was ever put in, or you've given him the pieces that the talent around him is good enough that you can make up for some of his deficiencies.
Well, that's what the perfect mock draft is all about, injecting talent into these teams. Here from the Ingles studio, always brought to you by Ingles Supermarkets. Low prices, love the savings. Let's go to the 4th round where the Giants have the Bears pick here. Again, 112 overall. You got them taking Cam Jurgens, center out of Nebraska.
Feliciano's a good stopgap, but I mean, you can't really think that he's going to be the long-term play. I mean, you can't think that that's going to be your solution for ever. You know, Feliciano's 30 years old. He's a nice vet for right now. Cam Jurgens, the biggest knock on him, and he has screamed up boards. I would love to be his travel agent right now because I think he's visiting 26 of the 32 teams for top 30 visits. And what that tells me is that teams are seeing the same thing with him that I saw after I dug into it further. Most of the drawback on him was that he's thin. And then I realized that you're playing in the Big Ten, you're playing in a scheme that you don't necessarily fit in. And I don't know that he's ever going to bulk up. You know, there are a lot of players that you say, man, I wish you could add 15 good pounds to the frame. I'm not sure I say that with him. I just look at it and go, okay, your fit is better on a line where you have, as Giant fan Brian Haynes would say, high on ollies, which is what you've got in Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal and Glowinski. Now I've got the mobile, the pull piece, the out in front because he is athletic, and I think you could mitigate some of the size concerns, and he could be a great value here. Probably a year away. Probably need to get him acclimated because he could be a little bit of a I'm not going to say a liability in the run game, but you're going to have to teach him how to set and use his leverage in an NFL kind of offense.
2 picks in the 5th round for the Giants. The first one at 173 overall, 147 overall. And this guy, little tiny feller.
I'm sure there are a lot of Giants fans right now that are looking at me going,
Mom, I wish you could be Santa's little helper and shut your damn cake hole.
Well, I need CORDALE Flott to do the exact opposite. I need him to open his cake hole and shove every fucking complex carbohydrate that there is into it, because he is just a little feller. You look at the natural skill. Something I talk about with corners a lot is, does your brain line up with your feet, and do your hips move in tandem? With CORDALE Flott, none of that's the problem. The problem is that when he was asked to play press man, get physical, he was so tiny that even the smallest receivers were taking advantage of him. Now, there are ways to mitigate that. The way I'm currently looking at this, the market for Bradbury hasn't developed. If it was going to develop, I think it already would have. And that could be we're waiting on the Stephon Gilmore thing to fall. If that's the case, then I will revise this down the line. As of right now, I need somebody to replace Darnay Holmes, with the intention that eventually that will be the Bradbury replacement on the outside. CORDALE Flott has all of the natural ability to do that, but you're going to have to get his body right. So initially, you're going to have to hide him in the slot, use the good cover skills, let him deal with the smaller, shiftier receivers, which he will do quite nicely, and he would be a value here and a long-term play. That's what I look for in the 4th round. Who can be serviceable now, be an improvement over what I have now, but the upside is what I'm really after, and that's what he screams to me.
The Giants have the Chiefs pick at 173 overall, and you've got them taking Smoke Monday, safety out of Auburn.
There are a lot of teams that evaluate him as a linebacker, and in this scenario for the Giants, I don't look at that. I see him as a complement to Xavier McKinney. You let Xavier McKinney do the things that he does. You use the safeties, and Smoke Monday is the big enforcer that I can play in the box. He's good against the run. He plays like his hair's on fire. Very good blitzer, one of the best blitzing safeties in this draft, and this just gives you more things that you can throw. Now it's just more toys, and that's what – if you look at how the Ravens' defense was built and how they've drafted over the years, I understand that Daboll in the front office came from Buffalo. Buffalo does some of this too, but not to the same extent that Baltimore did. Baltimore would just accumulate defensive toys and lob them at Wink Martindale and say, you figure it out. And that's kind of how I think this is going to go. I love the compliment with him and McKinney. The reason he's still available is attitude issues. There were some bad interviews at the Combine. A couple of my guys that were in Indianapolis actually had him on their show. They had nothing but nice things to say about him. So, what happened in the room, I don't know. And most teams won't come off of that, but there has been some speculation that maybe he didn't interview that well.
The last pick for the Giants in the 2022 NFL Draft comes up in the 6th round at 182 overall. Brian Robinson, running back out of Alabama.
And this goes to, I've got to protect Saquon Barkley. This is a draft that the difference between, I've got 4 running backs that are clearly better than the rest, and that's James Cook, Zamir White, Kenneth Walker, and Breece Hall. Those guys, there's a clear delineation. Then there's about 20 more that fit into, hey, what is it that you're looking for? Here at 182, Brian Robinson's a player that can run between the tackles. This is, I call this what Saquon Barkley's issue to me is he has Kerryon Johnson disorder of, I love all of your tape. The problem is that your body is not built for what it is that you do. You have a basketball player's build, which leads to issues with your knees and with your ankles. And so I don't want you running between the guards in these goal and 2 to go. I want a big thumper that can do that, and that's what Brian Robinson represents. He didn't have as many carries at Alabama as you would necessarily want, but the good thing is that means there's a lot of tread on the tires. The good was very good, and he kind of reminds me of a LeGarrette Blount, where, yes, he's the big thumper, big, thick, run between the tackles, 3 yards in a cloud of dust running back, but if he gets on the outside, he can beat you with his speed. It's just he's kind of an accelerating runner that you're not going to be blinded by any of that. But he's a nice compliment to Saquon and would be a nice value here to protect Saquon in the 6th round.
Now, you have one more player that we don't have another spot for them to fall to the Giants, but maybe the Giants can come up with a 7th-round pick for this guy.
And this is a guy that I know they really like, and this is one of the reasons that they've moved off of the 2 offensive linemen in the first 2 days. This kid's Devin Cochran. He's an offensive tackle from Georgia. He's somebody we haven't talked about on this channel before.
Georgia Tech,
excuse me. And he hadn't had – the hype had not been there, and then he crushed the pro day. And what's funny about these guys that crush the pro day is it seemingly every guy that does this, you see about 10 teams that come along and say, I mean, we've been on that guy forever. No, I don't think you have. And you look at the backstory, he was recruited to be a run blocker, and then the offense changed when the coach changed at Georgia Tech. And some of the tape is inconsistent. He's very raw, but there are a lot of teams seemingly in the NFL that think this is going to be a 7th-round kind of guy, a priority undrafted free agent. I, at this point, don't think he will make it that far. So that's just a player, if you're a Giants fan, to put under your hat and look at and go, you might wind up with an extra 7th-round pick at some point, and that's probably who it's intended to be.
All right, the perfect mock draft for the New York Giants. You got to shore up that offensive line, and you could do that with a pick at 5 and a pick at 7, or 5 or 7. Either way.
You just got a lot of mobility here if you're the Giants. You just have to find a way to figure out what you got in Daniel Jones. And year 1 of a rebuild under Brian Daboll with the looking to the future. If you like this mock for the Giants, if you don't like this mock, if you're looking at me and just thinking,
let me tell you why I suck.
You're totally inclined to do that. I got a hot wife and I talk about sports for a living, so you're probably not going to hurt my feelings. But feel free to put those in the comments. Starting this Friday, we will be doing mullet mailbags with draft questions. The goal is to do about 2 minutes on every team, 30 seconds rapid fire of your questions after our ESPN radio stream 3 to 5 live here on the YouTube channel. So every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday we'll be answering those. So put those in the comments, and we will get to them as quickly as we can and as many as we can ahead of the April 28th NFL Draft live from Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yeah, be sure to join us for each and every pick. We will have coverage all 3 days of the NFL Draft.
And I only talk faster as the draft gets closer. It's almost like you're hitting the fast forward button on me. By the end of this, it's almost going to be unintelligible.
Yeah, especially when he gets a couple of brews in him, and
there will be many of those. Unlike Mel Kiper, I will piss whilst on camera. I hope I don't piss while on camera because that would be awkward.
I promise.
Whilst we're streaming, I will take a potty break, and I will also crush copious number of beers. So by the end of each day, it might just be run the damn ball.
You're in the Sportsocracy. We always come to you from the Ingles studio. Ingles Supermarkets, low prices, love the savings. I'm Tank Spencer. He's Jeremy Greene.
Yeah.
And we will see you next time.